Hello and welcome to this demo. In this demo, we will be looking at deployments in Kubernetes. So here I have my Kubernetes master and two worker nodes. I'm now going to create a definition file for deployments. So I'm in my PyCharm IDE and I'm now going to create a new folder for my deployment. I will call that deployment. And I will create a new file under it, and I will call that deployment-definition.yaml. Okay, so I have my deployment definition file here, and on the right I have the replica set definition file. So as we said in the lecture, the contents of both the files are very similar, so at least for our purposes. So I'm going to refer to that to create my deployment definition file. I'm first going to specify the API, and it is going to be apps/v1, and the kind is going to be deployment. So I can see deployment from the drop down. Under metadata, I'm going to specify a name for my deployment. I will call it my app-deployment, and I'll have a label called app, my app, and a type called frontend. Now, the specs section for the deployment is very similar to the one we have in the replica set. So I'm just going to copy the contents over from my replica set definition file, and I will place it here. I'll just change the number of replicas to 3 to start with, and everything else remains the same. We have the template. Under template, we have the pod definition file contents, and we have a replicas, a number, and a selector. Now remember, in production use cases, typically you will not be creating a pod definition file or a replica set definition file. In most use cases, you will be creating only a deployment definition file directly. Now, if you want to, you could start by creating a separate pod definition file and copy the contents from that over to the deployment definition file if you feel that that's more convenient for you. But that is not necessary. For any project, you could directly start by creating a deployment definition file. Now, once I have the file created, I'm going to do a quick lint check. So I'm going to copy the contents over from the editor, and I will place it in the YAML lint website. I'll click on go and make sure that it's a valid YAML file. Okay, so now on my Kubernetes master node, under the demos folder, I will create a folder structure for my deployment definition file. So I will create a new folder named deployment, and under that I will create a deployment definition file and copy over the contents. Now to create the deployment, I will run the kubectl create command, and before that I just want to make sure there's nothing running already. So I'm just going to run a kubectl get all command, and as you can see, there's only a default service running, and so we're good. Now I'm going to run the kubectl create deployment definition command to create the deployment. And when I now run the kubectl get all command, I can see that it's created my deployment, and the deployment has in turn created the replica set, and the replica set has in turn created my pods. So I can see the 3 pods running my application, and I have the replica set and the deployment. To see more details about the deployment, run the kubectl describe deployment command, and you will see additional information about the deployment, the time that it was created, the labels that is specified, the selector, and the image that's under the pod template, and the status. Under the events, you can see that the deployment has scaled up replica set my app deployment to 3, and that's the only event. Well, that's it for this demo. We will see more operations on the deployment in the upcoming lecture, and we will see more demos on deployment in a short time. That's it for this demo, and I will see you in the next demo.